Hello, my name is Sophia, and today I'm here to share my experience enlisting into the United States Army and going through the MEPS process. So, a little bit of background: I enlisted as a musician in the United States Army regional bands. My MOS is 42 Romeo, meaning that I'd be assigned to a regional band, not a premier band. A premier band would be a 42 Sierra, and that would be if I was assigned to the Pershing Zone, the Army Field Band, the West Point Band, or the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. The regional bands, there's about 20 locations around the US and a couple overseas. The premier bands hire on a vacancy basis, so if they have a horn player who retires, they hire a horn player. But the regional bands are kind of on a rolling basis where they hire as people apply and as people qualify. So to become a musician in the US Army, regardless of whether you're going regional band or premier band, you need to win an audition before you enlist. So this video is just going to kind of take you through my process of enlisting. I'm not going to talk tons about the audition process. It's just going to kind of explain the process of enlistment and the MEPS experience, because MEPS is interesting. I'll probably say this many times throughout the video, but your MEPS experience and your enlistment process is going to vary based on your recruiter, where you're at, what MEPS you're going to. This is just my experience in 2023, and I hope that it can be helpful for you and if you're enlisting or if you're thinking about it. Little side note before I get started, my recruiter is amazing, and he's like been such a huge ally in this whole process. Some people have horror stories about the recruiters like not being helpful, not knowing what to do, not being super nice. My recruiter, he's been a recruiter for a really long time. He's really good at his job, and he like knows what he's doing. Like I said, the process for enlisting as a musician is a little bit different than other jobs in the military. So not all recruiters like know how to do that. He's enlisted many musicians before, like he knows what he's doing. He's great. So if my recruiter's watching, I'm not going to say his name, but if he's watching, hey, what's up? Thank you so much. You've been like awesome. And if you don't like your recruiter, get a new one. Go to your office and ask for a different recruiter, or go to a different office if there's another one near you. But get a recruiter who you trust and who does a good job, because they are going to be super important through your entire process. In the summer of 2022, I began communication with my audition coordinator about setting up an audition. We did an interview over the phone, and I submitted my pre-screening audition in the fall of 2022. On August 30th, 2022, I made it past the pre-screening round, which was amazing, and such a big win for me because I've had a lot of failed auditions and a lot of rejections, so it felt just really great to get one. And then I was talking to my audition coordinator after that, and we realized that I actually was moving through the process a little bit too early, because I had just started my junior year at Illinois State University. If I had won a job and accepted it then, I would have had to leave school and not finished my degree. And I really wanted to finish my degree because, number one, I had already completed so much, and also I just want to have a degree for whenever I leave the Army. So then we decided to hold off on the live round audition until the spring of 2023. So I scheduled that with my audition coordinator, and then the way the regional bands work is that they come out to you to do your audition. You don't have to travel to them, you don't have to drive somewhere, whatever. They will come to you and do it. So I scheduled my live audition for Wednesday, April 14th, 2023. So it was like the following spring after my pre-screening round. And I performed a live audition on campus at ISU. And you can pick where you want to have it, what time you want to do it, and all that stuff. So it was great to just like have some control over what was going on. So the way the regional bands work is that they have an audition committee that meets once a month that reviews the auditions and decides who gets accepted. And then if you don't pass, it gets like pushed back to the next month and they review it again. So I did my live round audition in April, and they weren't going to review my audition until June, because that was going to be that was like the start of the new year or something like that, where they would know which instruments needed how many people and all this stuff. On Friday, June 9th, 2023, I received the call from my audition coordinator that I had won a position with the United States Army Regional Bands. And I was so excited. So just to tell a story about that call, because it was just a really great moment. So I knew that the call would be coming probably in the first week of June, whether or not I won the audition or not, but I wasn't quite sure when. And I was also at an orchestra festival, so I was traveling. I was in New York. I wasn't at home. This was after the first week of the festival. I was sitting at dinner in like the dining hall with a bunch of my friends, and at like 5:30 my phone rang, and I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't usually get too many calls. People just text, you know. Picked up my phone, looked at it, and it was the name of the audition coordinator. And I was like, oh my god. So I like ran out and I didn't say anything to my friends. I was like, I gotta go. And I ran out into like the lobby of the dining hall where it's quieter. And I was like, hello. And he went, Specialist Bertoli. And I was like, oh my God, I like freaked out because I had just won a professional job, and it had been a lot of rejection and a lot of no's and a lot of failures, and to just finally get the yes was just such a triumphant, like, amazing moment. And specialist would be my rank when I enter the Army, so that's why he said specialist. It was just really cool. It was really awesome. So then I went back into the dinner, and they were like, "Hey, what happened? Are you all good?" And I was like, "I just won a professional job! Oh my God!" Called my mom. I texted my professor, my trombone professor, and I was like, "I did it!" So then after I got that call, I was like, "All right, time to work with a recruiter." So I contacted my recruiter, who I'd worked with him a little bit before to kind of figure out what this whole process would be like. So I already knew him. Contacted him, and I was like, "All right, let's go." And then he sent me the mountain of paperwork that I'd have to complete. So it's a big, huge, long application called an enlistment application, and everybody enlisting into the Army has to complete this. It's a lot of medical releases, information about your history, your medical history, your legal history, travel background, your citizenship information, places you've lived, places you've been employed. And then you have to get references for your employment, your residences, what schools you've gone to, and also character references. And then there's like a 150 question questionnaire about your medical history, which I will get into a little bit later. So throughout the rest of June, I worked on this packet. I got all of my references. I kind of went through my whole history and wrote everything down. And then in early July of 2023, I submitted all that information to my recruiter. And then a couple weeks later, on Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023, I received a call from my recruiter that I had passed my pre-screening for MEPS and I could go to MEPS to process. So basically, once you submit all of that information to your recruiter, they send it off to MEPS, and MEPS just kind of checks to see if you would be on like baseline qualified for military service. So if you have a pre-existing medical condition that disqualifies you, then they're not going to let you go to MEPS because they already know that you'd be disqualified. They want everybody going to MEPS to pass. That's their ideal. So they want to make sure that you have nothing in your history that would completely disqualify you. So what is MEPS? MEPS is an acronym that stands for Military Entrance Processing Station. There's about 60 locations around the US. Everybody entering the military must pass processing at MEPS, and then when you ship out to basic training, you have to go back to MEPS and get like a final inspection before departing. So there's two types of applicants at MEPS. There's processors and shippers. I was a processor. Processing means that you have to go through a lot of different tests and all of these types of things to make sure that you are qualified to serve in the military. Your MEPS location depends on your recruiter and where they send you. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to the one that's closest to you. So if you go online and search for MEPS locations and you find one that's closer, that doesn't mean that you're just going to go to that one because that's the closest. Like, for example, Chicago is technically the closest to me. It's like an hour and 40 minutes away from where my recruiter was. But for some reason, they sent people to St. Louis instead, which is like 2 hours away. And then they stopped sending people there. They sent people to Indianapolis instead, which is like 3 hours away. I don't know why, whatever, it doesn't really matter, but went to Indianapolis MEPS. So a typical MEPS visit is a 2-day process. You drive to MEPS the first day, stay in the hotel overnight, and then you attend MEPS and do all of the things the next day. So my first MEPS visit was on Sunday, August 6th to Monday, August 7th, 2023. So you have the option, you can either take a shuttle, which is provided by your recruiters in the military, or you can drive yourself. The first time I went, I got the shuttle. So I went to my recruiter's office about 10 a.m. that morning. We arrived at the MEPS hotel in Indianapolis around 3 p.m. Indiana time. And just a side note, this is a regular hotel, at least in my experience at the Indianapolis MEPS. It was a regular functioning hotel. It was not a military hotel. It was not on a base. It was just, MEPS just blocks out some rooms every night. So basically, MEPS has an office on one of the floors, which is kind of their base of operations in this hotel because it's such a big hotel and it is functioning as a normal hotel. So it's basically just 2 hotel rooms with the wall knocked down in between them, and it was converted into like a common area / office space. So I got there, I checked in, and I waited with other applicants for a few minutes. Then we got a briefing from the person who was running it about what MEPS was, what the rules were, what we could and couldn't do. And this might vary a little bit depending on your location. I'm not sure. This is just my experience. So applicants over 18 could leave the hotel. They just needed to check in and out. Applicants under 18 could leave the hotel as long as they were accompanied by somebody over 18 or if they were with a parent or guardian. You had to be back in the hotel by 9:30 p.m. and back in your room by 10 p.m. So when I checked in, I had to give them my license, put all this information down about me. They had a list of people they expected to be at MEPS, and they had to check that all those people are there. Just a little side note for anybody going. When I went, they asked me for my recruiter's name, his phone number, and his rank. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I know his rank because it just like it never come up in conversation. And I just have him in my phone as his name. So I was like, oh God. So I like texted him and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. What is your rank? And he didn't respond right away because it was Sunday and he told me, he was like, I'll be available, but I'll be traveling. So it might take me a minute to get back to you. I ended up finding it because he and I emailed once and it was in his like email signature, so I found it. But for a second, I was like, oh my God, are they not going to let me check in because I can't remember his rank? It was fine. So we checked in, I got this briefing, went to my room. My roommate wasn't there yet. It was just me in my room for a while. This was about 3:30 p.m. by the time I got to my room. I kind of just hung out for a while. Dinner was served around 5 in the hotel. It was fine. It was just whatever. And I was really, really, really nervous. So I didn't really do anything. I kind of just sat around, which ended up not being the best decision. I'll get into that later. So my roommate got to the hotel around 5. We talked a little bit. She was really nice. She had been to MEPS before, so she was nice to kind of have somebody who knew what it was like. And then I kind of just sat around my hotel room for a long time. I had trouble falling asleep because I was so nervous, and I ended up hardly getting any sleep that night, obviously, which ended up also being a detriment to my success at MEPS. I'll get into that in a second. Wake up call was at 4:15. I woke up around 4, got ready within 5 minutes, like brush my teeth, whatever, wash my face. And we went downstairs around 4:15. You have to go downstairs with your roommate. You have to check out with your roommate. Breakfast was pretty decent. Actually, it was much better than dinner, so that was good. Fun fact, when I was like going back to my table with some of my food, I had put my food down, I went back to get coffee. As I was walking back to my table with the coffee, I slipped on the floor because there was like water all over the floor in this one spot for some reason, and I spilled coffee all over my sweatshirt, which was so awesome. I was like, great, this is wonderful. Great way to start out my day. And I drank a lot of coffee. I drank so much because I was really nervous and I was exhausted and I wanted to be alert and focused that day. It did help me be awake, but it also ended up making me super wired and nervous, like more nervous than I already was. We left the hotel around 5:30 a.m. and arrived at MEPS a little before 6. We got off the buses and lined up in front of the doors and got a briefing about security at MEPS. So basically, there's just no weapons, drinks, or food. You can bring in water, but there's no point because they have water fountains there. So then you go through the security check, which is similar to an airport. You put all your bags through the scanner, and then you walk through the metal detector. Basically just, checking to see if you have any weapons or anything that's not allowed there. And then when you walk in, there's kind of a central lobby area, and there's a big front desk, and that front desk is like the hub of everything. So once everyone got inside and went through security, they separated everybody into 2 lines, into people who were processing and people who were shipping, and then they started checking people in. So they check your ID, they check to make sure that you're on the MEPS list, that you're supposed to be there that day, all this stuff. And MEPS basically has different stations that you go through throughout your day, and you have to pass each one to be cleared to enlist or ship off. Processors have to go through everything, every station at MEPS. Shippers have a couple things that they do, and then they mostly just kind of leave. So processors have to go through a full medical, which means that they have to get basically every part of their body inspected: ears, eyes, height, weight, heart rate, blood pressure, urinalysis, blood draw, and doctor visit. And then shippers just have to go through, they have to get their weight taken, they have to check check to make sure that they're not pregnant and they have no drugs in their system, those kinds of things. So after we checked in, they sent us to our branch liaison offices. And so basically, because every branch of the military goes to the same MEPS locations, they have an office for each branch at each MEPS location. So there was an Army office, Marines, Air Force, Navy, all that stuff. So they sent us to our branch liaison office. We went there, checked in with them. They gave us a name tag. So once we checked into our branch liaison office, they sent us to medical. When we first arrived in medical, they put a bunch of us in a room and gave us a briefing about kind of the procedures for that day, our rights as applicants. And just something to note, you can always request extra personnel to be around. So if you're getting your blood drawn and you're like, I just want somebody else there, you can always request hey, can I just have an extra person in the room? Or if you're getting your doctor visit done, you can always request that there be extra people there, which can be good if you just feel uncomfortable with the person giving you your exam, or you just want someone else there. So there's a bunch of different stations around the medical center. Once you finish all of those stations, you go to the doctor visit, where you complete an in-depth physical exam and a review of your medical history. So after the briefing, where they told us all of this information about what was going to happen that day, they took everybody's heart rates and blood pressure. And because I was so nervous and had a ton of coffee that morning and hadn't slept at all, my heart rate was over 100 BPM. And basically, your heart rate has to average below 100 BPM to pass that portion of medical. So because it was over it, they're like, okay, it's fine. Just sit here and chill out. We're gonna check in a couple minutes. Like it'll be fine. So they measured it twice when I was in that room, and it was too high both times because when they checked it the first time and they found out that it was too high, I started freaking out more because I was like, oh my god, why? What's going on? Why is it too high? Like this never happens because I don't have issues with my heart. So I was like, I knew I was just nervous, and the reason that my heart rate was high was because I was nervous, but it freaked me out so much. So everybody in there, I want to say, like, shout out to the Indianapolis MEPS because every single person there, especially the people in medical, were so nice. Like, they were so patient and so kind and so calm, and everything was very relaxed. And I've heard plenty of horror stories about MEPS, but I'm saying if you're going to Indianapolis, you were in good hands. All right, they were awesome. So obviously I didn't pass this portion of it, but I kind of wasn't sure what that meant because I was like, oh, what if they take it later and it's fine? You know, I honestly didn't know. So we kind of moved past that. They were like, okay, just go through the rest of MEPS. We'll deal with this later. So I moved through the rest of medical and passed each section. So there's a hearing test where you sit in a little booth with a clicker and you click it every time you hear a sound. So then you do a vision test, where they basically just determine if your vision is within a correctable range. I obviously have glasses, and I honestly have a pretty high prescription, but that didn't cause any issues for me. Certain visual impairments can be barriers to getting certain jobs, but that wasn't an issue for me personally. I just have a bad prescription, but I don't have any big problems with my vision. And then they also do a color blindness test. And then I moved on from there. I did height and weight. So then I moved on to the blood draw. The blood draw is just for an HIV test. So it's a really, really tiny amount of blood, and it takes like 30 seconds. It's really fast. I don't have any issues personally with passing out, so I wasn't worried about it, but I imagine that if you do tend to pass out when you get your blood drawn, you should tell them. But you're in a typical like blood drawing chair and there's people with you, so if you do pass out, like you're gonna be fine. So then after this, I had to go to the bathroom, so I did my urinalysis. The nice thing about Indianapolis MEPS, I don't know if it's just true everywhere, but they let me do it in the order that I wanted. So I was like, well, I'm not ready to go to the bathroom yet, so let's not do the urinalysis yet. They were like, great, just let us know when you can go, and then we'll do it. And there's also cups and water fountains everywhere, so if you can't go to the bathroom, then you can just keep drinking. So the urinalysis is something that a lot of people get freaked out about, which is fair because it's not the most fun thing to do. Normally with urinalysis tests that I've done in the past for various things, you're in a room by yourself, but because they need to make sure that you're not cheating the test, they have someone watch you do it. So there's like a toilet and a typical like bathroom setup, and then a barrier, and then the window to the lab. There's a person who stands kind of near the barrier and they just like watch you, but the person isn't, they're not like staring you down. They're just there to make sure that you're not slipping anything in. And so you pee, you give the cup to the attendant, and then they send off half of your pee to get analyzed for drugs, and then half of it gets used for a pregnancy test. And the pregnancy test, it takes like a minute and 30 seconds or something like that. You stand there and wait while they do it. So I got all that done. I passed everything, which was great. And then it was time for the physical exam, which is the doctor visit, and it is the most stressful thing ever, and it sucks. There are two doctors there. There's a male and a female. You have the option to see either doctor, but if it is the one of the opposite gender, then you can have a female attendant or an attendant of your same gender with you to observe. While I was waiting to see the doctor, the male doctor ended up being available, and they were like, they offered. They were like, "Do you want to see him? If not, like we can skip you for now and wait for the female doctor." And I was like, "I'm gonna wait for the female doctor," and they're like, "Cool, no problem." So I've heard some horror stories about this physical exam, and honestly, the things that I heard bad things about were the things that were the easiest. So everybody talks about the duck walk and all the underwear Olympics, as they're called. There's a couple exercises that they ask you to do because they have to check your balance, your mobility, your joints, and then you get into your underwear and they examine you to make sure that everything's okay. So the first thing that we did when I was in there, the doctor had me do these exercises. So it was the duck walk. I'm not going to demonstrate it. There's a million videos online demonstrating it. It is not very hard if you're like relatively athletic and okay and you move fine. Like you'll be okay. If you're really worried about it, go search for a YouTube video and practice it at home. So then they did a couple other joint checks. They made sure I could move my arms correctly. I had to show them that I could do certain moves so they could check out my joints, all this stuff. Super, super quick, super easy. And then they were like, all right, take off your clothes. And I got into my underwear. And also, side note, the doctor I was with was so nice and so like polite, and she was very like, take your time, like we can whatever. Like she was really really nice. So I was very lucky. So then I got into my underwear, and they basically just check you for any scars, tattoos, marks, anything like that. If you have had surgery in the past and you have like surgery marks, they check for those. They check to see if you have any like brandings or anything like that. Tattoos are fine. You just have to tell them what they are. And there's certain requirements for where they can and can't be and how big they can be. I don't have any tattoos, so that's not an issue for me. And then you strip down completely, you do a breast exam, and then they check under the hood. All of that was super easy. They give you like a little gown to cover up so you're not like fully exposed the entire time. That all was very easy and very quick. So after all that, you get back into your clothes, and then that took probably about 15 minutes. It really didn't take that long. I kind of expected it to take longer. But again, the doctor was so like kind and generous. She was like, I'll turn around, like let me know when you're ready, like take your time, all the stuff. Like the doctor was so nice, which I was very glad about. So then after all of that, then you go through the like questioning, I guess. um so basically, like I mentioned earlier, you have to fill out this huge long questionnaire about your entire medical history. It's about everything that's ever happened to you, every injury you've ever had, any time you've ever gone to the doctor, any medications you've ever been on, everything that you can think of. There's things on there you're like, I didn't even know that was the thing that happened. Yes, you have to fill it out, let them know everything. So you fill all that out, you send it to your recruiter, they send it to MEPS, and then the military has this thing where they go and request to see all of your medical records. So they're basically, there's a system that they have where all of your medical records get uploaded to this one system, and they go and find everything and get all the information that they need. So on the doctor's computer, she had access to all the medical forms from like any time I had gone to the doctor, and they'll sit there and be like, okay, so you went to the doctor at this date, and the doctor said this, what happened, like why did you go to the doctor? This isn't really an issue as long as you tell them the truth and you haven't had any huge medical problems in your history. If you have like a severe history of heart disease, like that's going to cause a problem. But if you just broke your arm one time when you were in like 5th grade, like it's okay. Again, I've heard plenty of horror stories about this part. I'm going to share my experience. My experience was not fun, but it could have been a lot worse. And like I mentioned way earlier, because I had too high of a heart rate, the doctor was like, okay, you've been sitting for a while. I'm going to take your heart rate again. And this is going to determine whether or not you pass, basically. And I was like, oh, wonderful. So I was still super freaked out. I was still like really hopped up on caffeine, and it was too high again. So that basically meant that I failed MEPS and I needed a waiver. So the first waiver was for my heart rate. Because it was too high, they just had to verify that my heart and blood were all in okay condition. So I had to go so they told me that I needed an EKG, a CBC, and a thyroid test. CBC is just like a general blood test, and a thyroid test to make sure that everything was working okay. And then my second waiver was was a mental health waiver. Because when I was 16, so about 5 years ago, I visited a social worker a few times because I had a close family member pass away. And they just wanted to make sure that I had never been on any mental health medications. I haven't mentioned it up to this point, but it is pretty well known, if you look up anything about MEPS or serving in the military, that you cannot be on any type of mental health medication and serve in the military. So antidepressants, anxiety medications, or any other medications for mental health problems disqualify you from military service. There are rules about whether, if you've been on them in the past but you're no longer on them, there are rules about that where you can serve if you've proved that you don't need them anymore, but I was never on anything like that, so I didn't have to worry about that. They just wanted me to pull my pharmacy records from the past 5 years to prove that I had never gotten any medications, and get confirmation from the social worker that I had never been on any medications, or that they had never diagnosed me with anything or prescribed medication. So that was pretty easy. All I really had to do was like go request some forms and send them forms. The heart thing was a little bit tougher. So, like I mentioned, they said that I would need an EKG, a CBC, and a thyroid test, and I had the option to either complete this at MEPS with the MEPS doctors or through my own insurance and my own means. So, for a second, I was like, oh, I'll do it at MEPS because maybe they can do it today. No. They would have sent me to a cardiologist, funded by MEPS. So that means I wouldn't have had to pay anything, which would have been great, but I would have to wait for it. So it might be another 2 or 3 months before they had been able to get me back to MEPS and have me see this other doctor. Also, because I live 3 hours from MEPS, it would have meant another 2-day trip where I missed school or missed work to see the doctors, and I just preferred to do it by myself because it was just going to be more convenient for me. The school year was about to start. I really didn't want to miss any more school or work, and I figured it would have been a little bit less stress to do it with my own doctors than just going to MEPS. So I left MEPS that day. I was pretty disappointed, but whatever, it's fine. Tons and tons of people need waivers, and a lot of people don't pass MEPS on their first try. So to get the waivers, I went through my whole medical history, and I tracked down every pharmacy that I'd been to confirm that I had never been medicated for any mental health reason. I contacted the social workers who I worked with and got like their confirmation that I had never been diagnosed with anything or medicated for any mental health problems. And then that was all taken care of. I sent all that information off to my recruiter. So then for the heart waiver, I got an EKG, a CBC, and a TSH thyroid test. I got those like the week after I went to MEPS, so like 3 or 4 days later. And then I submitted all of that paperwork to my recruiter. About 5 days after that, MEPS cleared my mental health waiver, but then decided that they actually needed more information to confirm my heart waiver. So even though I had given them every single thing that they wanted, they specifically asked for an EKG, a CBC, and a TSH thyroid test, they still decided that they wanted more from me. And I was like, oh, thanks. You couldn't have just told me that from the start? Whatever. My options were to either submit a Apple Watch, Fitbit, or like heart rate monitor records from the past 2 weeks, or to wear an event monitor for 2 weeks, or to just go to the MEPS cardiology consult. So at that point, I did not have an Apple Watch. I do now. So I had no like records of my heart rate or my heart issues. My other option was to either wear an event monitor for 2 weeks, which is like a heart rate monitor that usually sticks onto your chest, or to just go get a cardiology consult at MEPS, which again could have ended up being a very long waiting process, and I just really didn't want to go through that. So I debated to going and getting the cardiology consult from MEPS, but decided to just use my own cardiologist and my insurance to get an event monitor because my insurance is really great, and I ended up not having to pay very much to do all of this. About a week later, I saw a cardiologist and got an event monitor. Basically, it was just like a little sticky thing that stuck onto my chest and couldn't be removed for 2 weeks. So this event monitor like monitored my heart rate over this entire period. It determined if I had any unusual activity, abnormal spikes or dips in my heart rate, irregular rhythm, elevated heart rate, all of those types of things. After 2 weeks, I mailed the monitor back in, returned to my cardiologist a week after that, and then they told me the monitor came back completely unremarkable, and I submitted all of this information to my recruiter. I said, here's another clean EKG, here's a clean event monitor record, like my heart is fine, I was just nervous that day, all this stuff. I'm glossing over a lot of the details, but this was all very stressful because I don't have heart problems. I never have. The cardiologist said, they were like, you do not have any heart issues. If you had any heart issues that they're worried about, it would have came up on an EKG. So I don't know why they're making you do an event monitor. The cardiologist said I was fine. I got cleared. Everything was great. So then I submitted all of that information to my recruiter. On Friday, September 8th, I received a call from my recruiter that my waiver had been accepted and I could return to MEPS to swear in. Woo! So then came my second MEPS visit. This one was like a million times better in like every way, and it's so great. My recruiter and I scheduled my MEPS visit for the week after, so it'd be from September 12th to 13th, because if you remember, it's a 2-day process. This time my mom had some sick days or some personal days saved up, and she was like, I kind of want to use them so I can drive you to Indianapolis instead of you taking the shuttle, because I didn't have a car at this point. So if you drive yourself to MEPS, you have to be at the hotel at 8 p.m. by the latest. My mom got home from work that day. She drove to Normal to pick me up, and then we drove to Indianapolis from there. We arrived at the hotel around 5 p.m. Indianapolis time. We checked in. The worker at the desk didn't brief me because he knew that I had already been there, and that was great. So I dropped my luggage off in my room, and I went to dinner with my mom. So 8 o'clock came and went, and I did not have a roommate, which was such a relief. My roommate the first time was really nice, but it was just nice to like have full control over when I wanted to go to bed and get up and all of that. Went to bed around 9:30. I woke up about 3:45 to get ready. Same routine as last time, got ready pretty fast. I had all my clothes picked out ahead of time, all that stuff. Went downstairs, checked out, ate breakfast, waited for the shuttle to get to MEPS. I did not drink any coffee just that time, just to be completely sure that my heart rate was as normal as possible in case they measured it again. And I was also way less nervous this time, so that helped. So when I got to MEPS and checked in, I went through the same thing. They briefed us about security, went through security. 2 lines for shippers and applicants, all the same stuff. When I checked in, they sent me back to my branch liaison, and my branch liaison sent me to medical, and I was like, oh god, here we go. Because I figured we'd have to do some of that stuff over again. But then I got to medical, and they were like, no, you're good, go to your branch liaison. And I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. I didn't have to go through any tests, I didn't have to get my heart rate taken, I didn't have to do a urine test, I didn't have to do height and weight, I didn't have to do anything. It was amazing. Because medical is the most stressful part of MEPS, at least for me. So medical sent me back to my branch liaison office. I went to them. I sat there for a while while my counselor brought up all my paperwork and information, and he was like, okay, good news and bad news. Good news is you're good to swear in, like you're good. We got your contract is good. Bad news is we have to wait until 8 a.m. so we could get the contract and sign it, because there's some stuff that they have to do. They have to call people. It was about 6:30 a.m. at that point. So I was like, that's not even bad. I'll just sit and chill. So I just waited around till 8 a.m. I went to the there's a USO office there where they have like snacks and board games and video games and movies and all that stuff. I just sat around and waited. So around 8 a.m., my liaison came and found me, and we sat in his office and signed my contract. It was a lot of things to review, a lot of things to sign, but you have to make sure that everything is correct to make sure that they're not giving you something that's wrong. Basically, your contract has information about what job you're doing, your MOS, where you're going to basic training, where you're going for advanced individual training, which is your job training after basic, how long your enlistment is if you're going active duty or National Guard or reserves, and then if you're going active duty like I am, how long your reserve period is after you leave active duty. So my contract is about 8 years. So the first 3.5 years are active duty, and then all the 4.5 years after that are reserves. And that's very normal. That's like about a typical length. And my MOS, like I mentioned before, is 42 Romeo, so a bandsman with the Army Regional Bands. They go over your benefits, your job, your location of basic training, which for me was Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then your advanced individual training location, which is for me the Army School of Music in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Normally, most jobs don't get to pick their duty station. Their duty station is just where you're going to be assigned. So for 42 Romeo, for a regional bandsman, you actually do get a little bit of choice in your duty station. You get 3 options on the day that you enlist. So after you sign on the dotted line, you email your audition coordinator, and then they send you 3 options for your duty stations. So I emailed him, I said, hey, I signed up, give me my 3 options, and then he sent them to me. So my 3 options were Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, and Camp Humphreys in South Korea. And so I had to choose from those 3 which I wanted, then I'd email him back with my choice. So those were interesting locations, El Paso, Hawaii, or Korea. And I was like, well, I think El Paso's out. I don't really want to go to El Paso. So my options were Hawaii or Korea. And luckily by this point my mom was there, because parents, at least in Indianapolis MEPS, parents are allowed to come and watch your enlistment, your swear-in. So my mom had gotten there by this point, and we were sitting together while I got that email. So I kind of talked it out with her, and I was like, oh my god, this is like a crazy decision. Like, this is going to be a big deal. Like, this is where I'm going to be living. I really, really considered Hawaii, and I was kind of going to go for it. And then I ultimately decided that I was going to go with South Korea. A lot of people who have told that I chose South Korea over Hawaii were like, oh my god, why would you not choose Hawaii? That sounds amazing. I understand. I think Hawaii would probably be very cool to live in, but it was a 3-year enlistment, so meaning if I had chosen Hawaii, I would have been there for my entire contract. South Korea was only a 1-year enlistment, so I'd be in South Korea for a year, and then the other 2 years of my contract I'd be somewhere else. And I thought that'd be a cool experience, because if I didn't like Korea, I'd only be there for a year, and I would just get more experience going more places, which I just want to travel and experience the world, and I just thought it'd be really cool to go to Korea, because like, when else am I going to get the chance to go live in Korea? And then also, I don't really like hot climates very much, and I was like, I don't know if I want to live in like a tropical climate. What I kind of think about Hawaii is I'd be like, for like a month or 3 months or whatever, it'd be amazing, because it'd be like, oh my god, it's like vacation, like all this is beautiful, gorgeous. And then you'd be there for 3 years. And I was like, I don't know if I would like it for 3 years, you know? Again, I'm very lucky that I was able to choose. Most MOSs in the military have no choice at all, and you get sent where you get sent. But I figured I wanted to do Korea. It'd be a crazy, like, adventure, and I wanted to go for it. So I emailed my audition coordinator back, and I said, Korea. And he was like, all right. Then we waited around for a little bit. I did the swear-in ceremony where I got to raise my right hand and say that I will serve in the United States Army, all this stuff. This ceremony I'll redo again when I go back to ship out for basic training, but this was like a nice kind of like celebratory thing, because I had just gone through so much like stress and irritation and setbacks that it was really just so triumphant to be able to finally like say I am the United States Army. So I mentioned it earlier, but just a little bit about my enlistment. So my enlistment is 3 years and 22 weeks of active duty and 4 years on reserves. I'm going to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina for about 10 weeks, and then advanced individual training at the Army School of Music in Virginia Beach, Virginia for about another 10 weeks after that. My first duty station is Camp Humphreys in South Korea on a 1 year assignment, and then after Korea, I'll be assigned somewhere else. I don't know where that'll be yet. And I ship out to basic training on July 1st, 2024. As you could probably imagine, my second MEPS experience was like a million times better than my first MEPS experience. Partially because I didn't have a roommate. My mom drove me there. We got to go out and eat dinner. I didn't have to eat the hotel dinner. And it was just like a very happy moment for me because after so much like stress and struggle and all of this, I got to finally like say, yes, this is it. I'm doing this. And I mentioned it a couple times throughout the video, but the Indianapolis MEPS was like such a like good environment. I've heard lots of horror stories about really like not friendly MEPS workers, but every single person I talked to at the Indianapolis MEPS was so kind and so like generous and so patient, and they were so understanding. Like I was very stressful. I was very stressed, obviously, and they were like, "It's okay, you're good, everything's fine." So I was very thankful for that. That's going to be different based on anywhere you go for MEPS. It's going to be different based on your branch and your experience, whatever. But I was very lucky that I had a very good experience, at least my second time. So that was my MEPS experience in my enlistment process. As you can tell, it is not the most fun. It's pretty stressful. There's a lot going on, but if you are persistent, it will happen. Just persevere. I face a lot of setbacks, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of waiting around, a lot of like just not fun things, and I made it happen. So again, I hope this was helpful for you. If you're about to go through the enlistment process, if you're about to go to MEPS, if you have waivers, if you failed MEPS, whatever, good luck. It is not fun, but you will make it through, I promise. If you have any questions about my experience or you want me to elaborate more, please let me know. I'm happy to help with that. Just comment. All my socials are down below. Feel free to connect with me there. I hope this was helpful for you and your maybe upcoming enlistment into the United States military. Best of luck. Let me know if you're going to Fort Jackson on July 1st, 2024. I'll be there with you. And thanks so much for watching.